Piscataway started out as a JV program. The school opened in '57, and the first 2 years were a JV program only. And then the first varsity football season was in 1959, and it was pretty rough going, as you might expect with a fledgling program.
Well, I know that Jim Todgy was the coach the first 2 years. Piscataway started out as a 7 through 10 grade program, and Jim Todgy was hired by Bob Sterling, who knew him.
We had equipment and sleds and everything, and Todgy was gruesome. He was nuts and bolts. He didn't mess with. He was like Vince Lombardi. He didn't want to hear excuses or I'm hurt or nothing. I mean, he went at it a couple of times with big linemen, and I mean, I don't even mean he hit them, but he wrestled with them. He didn't care. Well, I grew up in Arbor, and I went to Arbor School, and then in 8th grade, because we didn't have 8, our class went to Newmarket. There was no Pop Warner, no nothing. We went to all the games. Well, I always went to Denellen games because I thought that's where I was going. And to be truthful with you, none of us knew we were going to Piscataway High School. We didn't find out until like 8th grade in Newmarket School. I thought I was going to Denellen all the time. And they announced, oh, they built a high school, you're going to Piscataway. Freshman year when we showed up, the school really wasn't ready yet for, I think, another year. Because our locker rooms and gym, they weren't ready the first whole year. So we had to dress football out in the tent.
When the school first started, and with Jim Todgy, they didn't have the building complete, and the gym wasn't completed, and the outdoor facilities, there was no running track or anything. Fields were just farm fields, and they put a big circus tent up, Sterling, to have physical education in inclement weather, or everything else was outside until the gym was completed, which was probably not until the second year.
We had no showers, and there was no buses taking us home from practice. We had to hitchhike. And the shame of it is, out in the field, it was all red shale. It wasn't even grass.
There were no bleachers. It was just at the beginning a field which had a rope around it.
So we started out practice in an all-white uniform. And by Friday, we had to bring them home, and my mother had to wash them to get the red all out. Well, a bunch of us were out behind the school one day, walking around, and we saw all these tombstones, 5 or 6, in this patch of woods. And on it, it was Indian tombstones, and there were Indian markings on them. And out of nowhere, one guy said, why don't we call us the Chiefs? And that's where we got the name from. And as far as the colors, athletic director Bob Sterling, he always liked Army, West Point, and he said we should have black and gold like them. Or they're the Knights of the Hudson. We could be the Knights of the Rare. Well, he said the Knights, but he meant Chiefs. I wanted black and gold, which is good, except the gold became yellow. I wanted the New Orleans gold.
What were those early days like, Jackie?
It was brutal and gruesome. There's no fun to speak of because our first year we did nothing but practice football and go home on Friday night and come back on Monday. We had never a game. Only at the end of the year we played chat. Well, that was 1957, and we scrimmaged and all. The only problem was it was pouring rain. We didn't even have a nice day to play football, but it was a relief because we did nothing but practice. We never played, never had a game. And I felt sorry for the guys ahead of me. I played quarterback, and we were a Group 2 school, but we played a lot of Group 4 schools, so we were outmanned. It was very depressing the first year. A lot of guys quit. It is what it is when you start out.
Yes, as far as I know, Coach Taji was just the JV coach. Coach Orsini, Anthony Orsini, who was later principal here at the high school, was the first varsity coach. And their first games, as I understand it, were played at the old Newmarket School, behind the Newmarket School. There's a field there now, soccer fields and tennis courts and basketball courts.
I first got interested in football when I was in Rutgers. Actually, when I was in high school, I wrestled, and as a senior, I was 115 pounds, and obviously not big enough to play football, but I always liked the sport, so I decided to go out for lightweight football, and I just took to the sport. And when I got to Piscataway High School, taking an interview for a wrestling coach job and driver education position, they wanted to start a wrestling team. My college coach, Dick Voliva, had two sons coming up, Rick and Billy, and he was looking forward to them being in a wrestling program, which Piscataway never had. So the first 2 years I was there, I did not coach football. I happened to take the interview for the wrestling job, and as I walked out of the interview room to go oversee Dr. Bamer to sign a contract, teaching and coaching, there was Tony Orsini sitting outside waiting for an interview. He was going for the football position and the teaching position. That was 1959. Ironically, Tony was my high school general science teacher, 9th grade in Union High School.
Orsini came, he was good. It's just that, you know, there's only one Lombardi.
And they had a JV and a varsity program after being there for 2 years. And so I said, I'll try for the assistant coaching job. And I was hired, and I became the end coach, doing pass patterns on the varsity, doing all the scouting. And I also was the JV coach for the first 4 years out of the 7 years I coached.
We didn't have any uniforms to speak of till the night before the second game of the year against St. Peter's. Because the first week in varsity to play Edison, we had to go over and borrow Rutgers uniforms to play our first game against Edison High School. The red shoulder pads, like on the shoulders, and white the rest of the body on the shirt and the pants with red trim. We felt like second fiddle citizens, because we didn't even have our own colors. Well, once we got our own, we had gray pants and black shirt with a gold helmet, and that's what we had all year. After the first year, athletic director Bob Stone, he got us a gold shirt, and we finally played on the field they're playing on now. Before that, we played on Newmarket Grammar School. They had a field next to it. Getting back to the helmet, everyone around had this up-to-date plastic helmet. Well, we had the old Notre Dame leather helmet. Norm would do certain things, and he'd have a plan, you know. Orsini was come see, come saw, you know.
The practices were where we go out and we decide what we're going to do now. I was completely different. I would, the day before, and I did it in wrestling the night before I went home. I'd make up the next day's practice because I knew just what I did, what I didn't have time for, and what I wanted to consider. Well, we had a program which had like only a two-man sled when we started out. We didn't even have a seven-man sled. And we had dummies. So the dummies had to be held. So what did you do during practice? You held a dummy. Did you run plays? No. So when they went into other things, I'd take the JVs and I'd try and run some plays before I went in so that they were doing plays, because I know as a coach or as a person who did it, you didn't want to be someone who just held a dummy. I can remember Fritz Laurinaitis, I gave everybody cards. And I said, you get the two-man sled from 1 o'clock to 1:30, and then the JVs have it from 1:30 for 20 minutes. Well, at the end of that practice, Fritz took the cards, he ripped them up, and he threw them in the air. That's a true story. So that lasted one day of me trying to organize things. It just didn't work out.
Well, I graduated from Piscataway High School in 1966. And actually, I was, I think, 13 years old when Pat Yanuzzi started the Pop Warner program. But I was too big to play when I was 13. So the first year that I played football at Piscataway was in 1963. And Charlie Garofano was the freshman. I think it was the only year he ever coached. Yeah. And I got made a center. Well, how they figured I was going to be a center, I have no idea. So then I was stuck at center for 4 years. And then Tony Orsini was the coach all the time that I was there. I played in the first Franklin Piscataway game. One of the Franklin Piscataway games we were supposed to play on a Saturday, and on a Friday afternoon at lunchtime, the head of the class president came in that said President Kennedy had been assassinated. And we all walked out to practice and wandered around. We weren't sure if we were going to play or not. And everybody was sort of in a daze. And then finally Mr. Sterling came walking up very slowly and said there's no game. So November 63, we were supposed to play Franklin, and it got canceled because of President Kennedy being assassinated. Tom came to the high school I think Tom Higgins came in 1970. And it was time for Tony Orsini to move on.
Piscataway's program was struggled from the very beginning. It was a rough go for the first 11 years. Coach Orsini got the ball rolling, so to speak, with Coach Tighe holding forth with the JV team before Coach Orsini took over. But we didn't have a whole lot of success. We were doormats in the area. We were very poor record-wise. When Coach Higgins came over from coaching in Newark, he brought with him a slightly different attitude, I believe.
Tom came from Newark, and we knew that he had played pro football. He came to a few practices that first year, and we got to know him pretty well. But in a short period of time, I gained a great deal of respect for Tom Higgins. He brought a toughness to the program that Piscataway had not had for a long time. And, for those of you that know Tom was a tough guy.
Going into the September of 70, he gets offered the job down at Piscataway. The vice principal, who was the former football coach, had suggested to the board to hire him. That guy was Tony Orsini. He came from Westside High School. Tom got the job. He called me, asked me to come down. I interviewed, and I got the opening. In the old days, football coaches were football coaches. They were worried about football primarily. When we found out which kids were ours, we tried to find them in the school day, find them in the classes, get to know them a little bit. And one of the things that we sort of found out or felt was that about 90% of the kids that came out for football in those first 2 years, they were kids that wanted to wear the football jersey on Friday in school. And that was their big thing. And I don't know how many times you would say things to these kids, and you would get the deer in the headlight look. These things were foreign to them, but we did have some players. We had Bill Bellina, we had Spilker, we had Rabone, we had Macho Giovanni, Pyramid. I mean, he was a good running back too. We had some good kids that gave us a really tremendous effort.
When Coach Higgins started here in 1970, the joke, as Coach Valva told me, was that he was who was a terrific wrestler here and a football player, and later became an outstanding wrestling coach. He was the leading scorer in Coach Higgins' first year, leading scorer in the team, and he was a dumpy lineman, as he liked to say. He fell on a fumble against South Plainfield late in the season, and that was the only win of the year for Piscataway.
Right about that time is, I think, when Sullivan came in, and they started put the Pop Warner program in, and that was he and a group of other people started to try to add the program. Well, we ended up with sort of like the first group of kids that wanted to play, and they were sophomores.
I grew up in White City, Florida, which was just west of Fort Pierce, Florida. In Florida, baseball was a serious game in Florida. I started playing t-ball at the age of 5. Continued, we moved to New Jersey at the age of 10. Actually, Keith Harney talked me into playing football. This would have been in 1968. I was not a very good football player. At Quibbletown Junior High School, there was a goalpost. So Pat says, come on over, let's try this. He paces off 10 yards, 2 yards, and then another 6 yards for a place kick. I put the tee down, he gets behind the goalpost, and I start kicking. And I'm making one after another, after I'd kick 10, I'd make 10. I think this caught the eye of Frank Sullivan. And he had one of our teammates hold the ball, and I was kicking, and second nature.
And some of the problem that we were faced with is that we were on a split session. We had all the juniors and seniors, and the sophomores, the freshmen and sophomores came in the afternoon with a different coaching staff.
You're not playing with a full deck of cards when you only have 2 grade levels to choose from. And Tom, in his infinite wisdom, said, you know, we gotta start doing things to build for the future. Eventually, we're going to be working with the entire, you know, school population as far as our team is concerned. So what we did, you know, after a few weeks, we would practice, you know, with the varsity, you know, after the morning session, while the underclassmen were in, and then at 5, when they were done, we would have another practice where we would combine everybody to start the process of getting the entire team together, which did pay its dividends.
We were starting to use those sophomores, and they had a different respect for the game. I imagine, I'm not real clear on that, but they might have been the first kids that had some of the Pop Warner, so that they understood a little bit more about football ideas and techniques and stuff like that.
I started in Pop Warner in the late 60s. I was still in college. And one summer I broke my ankle playing baseball during the summer. So I couldn't play football at Uppsala College with a broken ankle. And Joe Struss was the recreation director at the time, and they didn't have a Pop Warner coach. I mean, this is like July, and they had no coach. And he said, would you get it started? So I got started, and I coached the first month of the season with my foot in a cast. And then I really liked it. And then I just, you know, I kept coaching. And then I stuck with the Pop Warner program for 25 years.
And the sophomores that we were starting to rely on, we used to have certain days we would have a weight program. We would take it out as a team and laugh and fool around and that sort of created a bond between those younger guys and us.
One of the things he felt very, very passionate about was weight training, you know, and doing the things necessary in the off season.
And that team had a lot of solid players on it. We had, you know, that one had Horny, Pete Nigro, Stollery, Meserol, Candron. Oh yeah, Candron was a definite must.
Johnny Candron, who was not a big guy, but he had a heart that just wouldn't stop. He was told our sophomore year that he was too small to play. And that was a devastating blow to a lot of us who knew Johnny Candron. Subsequently, our junior year, he did come back and play.
So Coach Higgins had a tough start, but by the next year we started to turn the corner, and by 1972 we were competing for the conference title. And of course back then there were no playoffs in '72. There were football polls, but the two biggest things were the conference title and Thanksgiving.
We had a defense that I was very confident no one was going to run on us. I played defensive end. Next to me was Mark Meserole, who, I don't know, went 260, 270. And behind me was Gene Coyle, who was probably our best linebacker. And I will say that no one ran left. We were the right side of the defense. And when they did, they lost yardage. The 1972 team, the offense I would categorize as 3 yards and a cloud of dust. There was no razzle-dazzle with our team. We were not a passing team. We had Gene Coyle as fullback, Tony Johns as halfback, and Nick Saccone as the other running back. Gene Coyle would lead them through the line as a battering ram. And I've got to tell you, I have never seen Nick Saccone. If he was tackled or stopped at the line, he would make 3 yards. He was an angry runner.
South Plainfield was the leading team in the conference that year coming in, and Piscataway was vying to get their first taste of championship trophy. And it turned out to be a pretty remarkable day in Piscataway history.
This is a senior ball club, all seniors, and we're not trying to rile them up or anything else about that. We just tell them we've been there 3 years together, it's their ball game, they'll be ready.
South Plainfield was leading the conference. We were trying to compete for the title that year. It came down to this game. Candron had been beaten at one point earlier in the game on a pass.
There's the fullback, Joe Diller to tail back in the eye. Going back to pass, he looks for Valentine, he fires, it is complete, he got it, touchdown, South Plainfield. He got away nothing, South Plainfield from the post set will go for the 2. Calling back to pass, he looks downfield, he fires, incomplete, no good.
Run for a touchdown.
On the 40, let's put it on the 48-yard line of Piscataway. Calling back to pass, he's got good protection. He fires it, it's intercepted by John Candron. He gets it back to 35, to the 40, to the 30, to the 25, to the 10, to the 50, the 5, touchdown Piscataway. Score 6-6, and 35 seconds remaining in the first quarter. Piscataway will kick for it. The pass is there, the kick is up, it's good. Piscataway leads it, 7-6. After their game now, it's the Salmon will do the kicking off for Piscataway, taken by Hayden down on his own 20. To the 25, to the 30, to the 35, to the 40, to the 45, to the 50, to 40, to 35, he's all the way, to 20, to 10, touchdown. Went all the way on an 80-yard kickoff return for South Plainfield. A whale of a ball game here. For the 2 points, Crowley back down, hands off to Diller. I do not think he made it, he did not. South Plainfield leads it 12-7.
To throw a touchdown pass.
On the wishbone now, with Candron split out to the right. Tim Jackson, the quarterback, for Piscataway. Jackson pitches back to Saccone on a double reverse. He hands off to Candron. Candron looks like he wants to throw it. He was back. He passes. Throws out on the 10. The 5. Touchdown, Piscataway. Tony Calhoun will do the extra point attempt for Piscataway. They'll go for the 1. The ball is put down. The kick is up. It's good. Piscataway leads it 14-12.
In that particular game, I want to give a shout out to Johnny Candron, who was the absolute MVP of that game, and also a junior at the time, defensive back Greg Douglas. Now, the other touchdowns came just before the half. They had completed a pass to one of their split ends, and on the film, he's all by himself. out of nowhere, here comes Greg Douglas, like he was a sprinter. So now it's maybe 2 minutes before the half. They tried a passing play. Greg Douglas knocks the ball down. A running play, we sack him for a 2-yard loss. And then another running play, we stop him right on the line. So now it's 4th down.
And before the kick in the huddle, I believe it was Tony Danella, said, hey, if we block this, somebody pick it up and run it the other way. And as Coach Maglione told me, the line sort of opened up and Kandarin shot through, blocked it with his chest, and he spiked the ball on the ground with his chest, bounced back up to him, and on a dead run, he just picked it up right around the 20 or 25-yard line and took off the other way.
It'll be a 35-yard field goal attempt by James Valaquez. The snap in the center. The kick is up and blocked. John Campbell blocks it. He's going all the way to the 50, to the 40, to the 30, to the 20, to the 15, 10, 5, touchdown Piscataway. John Campbell. Joey Salmon will attempt the extra point. Ball is put down. The kick is up. Piscataway 21. Now Plainfield 12. And with that play, the first half is ended.
That gave Piscataway the lead at half, but it also brought about a very fun time in films the next day when they noticed that during Kandarin's run down the sideline, the South Plainfield coach took their star running back, who was not playing at the time, and pushed them on the field to go chase Kandarin down. Piscataway held on to win thanks to more heroics from Kandarin, another interception, and it was you know, a 21-19 victory for Piscataway.
Last year now, near the end of the year, we had some fine athletes there, Richie Pearman being one of them, and they started turning things around for Piscataway, putting us on the right track. This club put us there and push us down the track, and from here on out, Piscataway is going to have to be reckoned with.
I started playing youth football in Piscataway, Pop Warner, when I was 9 years old. I was one of the smallest guys on the team. Didn't play junior high school football because I stayed my freshman year and played with Frank Sullivan in the Pop Warner. So coming into sophomore year, a little animosity from some of the guys who I had played youth football with forever and ever, and from some of the high school coaches, because they thought that we were babies because we played Pop Warner our freshman year instead of playing junior high school football with the rest of the guys. We did dress for varsity, never got to get in a game, I don't believe. Guys would sneak candy in their socks and stuff like that because we knew we were never getting in the game. We're playing a really important game against Somerville in the sleet and the rain and the snow. And Eugene Brown had candy, and some guys were fighting over the candy. And a couple of the seniors turned around and started screaming at us that we weren't paying attention to the game and that get our heads in the game and stop jerking around and blah, blah, blah. So now we're freezing, wet. Gets to be halftime and we're all headed to the locker room. And we get to the locker room and the two senior captains, they stop us at the door and they don't let us into the locker room at halftime. Almost like a cartoon, the locker room door opens and they throw like 10 parkas out of the locker room. We all go grab the parkas and we're sitting down freezing, and everybody is walking past us, making fun of us, laughing at us. That was the start of the Shit Squad. We named ourselves the Shit Squad after that. We would call ourselves the Shit Squad. It was like the core of the 74 team, maybe 10 of us sophomores. And whenever things got tough on the field or we had a problem or whatever, we would always like reach down and say, remember, we're the Shit Squad, blah. And it was like kind of a gluing together name that we used, that I used definitely during the senior year.
I started out at Pop Warner in 7th grade. My parents were very big on musical instruments, and I had a saxophone, and I would take private lessons. And a couple of the guys, I'd go across the field while they were practicing Pop Warner, and a couple of the coaches grabbed me and said, you know, you ought to play football. You got the legs for it. You know, I was in the Boy Scouts with Mr. Trimpert, and Mr. Trimpert signed my form so that I could play. I didn't want to go to my parents, and I thought my parents would say no, so Mr. Trimpert signed it for me, and I made the team. Now, back then, you had to try out for the team. You weren't automatically on. He worked you to death, but he also encouraged you. He didn't just downplay it, you know. I've had other coaches that just, no matter what you did, wasn't good enough. This guy would tell you, hey, you're doing a good job, keep it up.
I was big, and I think it's important in any sport, that to create confidence, because when the player starts to believe that they can do it, so we worked really hard on creating confidence and giving the kids confidence what they played.
Learning the game was a little rough because, but it was right up my alley. I loved to hit, and we'd always play two-hand tag in the street. Now our streets were stone, not paved yet. So, you know, you'd get cut up pretty good with a two-hand tag because you would push the guy pretty hard, you know.
My understanding of the 1974 Piscataway team was that it was a very big, tough, physical, defensive-minded team. And this fits perfectly with what Coach Higgins was all about. If he was nothing else, that's the kind of team that he liked to have. He took pride in that. We still take pride in that identity. It's really been our identity for 50 years now. And that's what this team was. Coach Mammon told me this the other day, that this really was a super team. We didn't quite have that respect at times during the season, but looking back on it, you can see what a solid team it was. Jerry Mahoney was a dominating force on the line. Richie Collins at fullback was a beast. He was a hurdler on the track team, a very physical, fast kid. Mullins. Jackson.
So what we had in the backfield was three different backs, because Richie was a stud, pretty fast. Eddie Mullins could run like the wind, and Ray could do the heavy load, he could do the speed load, and then Lou Barrow was the quarterback, and Lou ran the wishbone extremely well.
And some of the other kids I really didn't see until we got out on the football field. But there was a bevy of these big kids who had not played Pop Warner football. Kurt Terhune, Pete Bellina, who turned out to be terrific. Zelesny, Hargrave, they turned out to be terrific linemen and terrific football players.
We knew we had a special team because when we were sophomores, we went undefeated. And then when we were juniors, the guys that played JV that didn't play varsity, the JV team only lost one game. So we knew we were going to be good our senior year. We had a great core of guys. We were solid everywhere. I was a defensive back. I was on the right side, Ronnie Rhodes was on the left side, and Gordon First was the free safety. I don't think we allowed a touchdown pass the whole season. Well, I was only there for the first 4 games. It was all running scores that they got against us, but our defense was solid. We had Rich Collins at linebacker, and he was all state in the Daily News for linebacker.
Oh, I love hitting people. There was nothing more satisfying than laying a guy out, you know, pancake him, or just getting your helmet in there and, you know, right in his chest and drive. In fact, that was our kind of mantra, was wrap, lift, and drive.
And we also had, at the defense ends, we had Jimmy DePaul and Tom Elliott, and they were big boys.
Jeff Hensel was just great at plugging the holes. They would die to double team him and his tackle, and that kind of left me free, and I was able to just sneak behind the line or through the line and get the runner in the backfield kind of thing. And our front line was great. You know, we had 2 huge guys that would never make it on Pop Warner. Jeff Hargrave, he was excellent, and he was a smart bugger too. I think he went to Yale. He really understood the game much better than some of the other guys, and he was a year younger than us. So, you know, I had him at tackle, and he would just tear it up.
Steve Bianchi called the defensive plays in the huddle.
Our defense was kind of more like an offensive game plan than a defense. It wasn't trying to stop them after you gained yards. It was to get in that backfield and jam them all up so that our linebackers could come around and make the tackles.
I think Ronnie Rhodes broke the school record that year with 6 interceptions. I don't know if it's been broken since, but the defense was awesome. Our defense was really good. I mean, we played Summit the first game of the year, and it was great because we got brand new uniforms that year, and our home jerseys were gold jerseys with black pants, and they were defending Star Ledger champs #1. And when we were seniors, Willie Wilson was gone. We played them here. They were ranked #1 in the Star Ledger, and we shut them out 20-0 in the rain.
Well, yeah, at 10 years old, that team was like an NFL football team to me. I mean, there was giant guys in the line, and the skill players were fast and physical. I just saw them as larger than life. And it turns out they were pretty big. You know, they were big, they were fast. That was, you know, after growing up and then looking back on it, that was probably one of the most talented teams of all time.
Every Friday before, or every eve of a football game, the staff would go out to dinner together, and then we would come back and meet with the team. Not sure if that was the year that we started the decal program, where the kids would put the decals on their helmets. Part of it was just to keep the kids, quote unquote, off the streets, to make sure that we had them focused on the game.
And then there was a couple of times we went out after the McDonald's. There was, a matter of fact, before the Watchung Hills game, myself, Rich Collins, and Gordon First did not go to the McDonald's. We went to the Southbrook Inn in Bound Brook to a bar and came back to the house, and we get back to Gordon's First house, and who's sitting in his living room but Maglione, because we were out past curfew. Screaming and yelling, we weren't going to play the next day. Now you got 3 guys starting, 3 defensive starters, and Rich played offense too. They said we weren't going to play the game. So me and Rich went there on his motorcycle. I was on the back of his motorcycle. So we go to leave out of Gordon First's driveway, and Rich pops a wheelie, and I fly off the back of the motorcycle in front of Maglione. And then he's screaming, "Well, you're definitely not playing tomorrow. You guys are benched." We played. We started.
I remember very vividly that the days of the game, we would come early and set the field up, and then the players would come and they would walk around and and get that first, you know, just game day feel for the field. There's a grass field, not this plastic stuff we're on now. And I remember that somebody spray painted the field. They came over and did some mischief, and everybody was pretty pissed off about it. But everyone was waiting for Jeff Hensel to get here. And when Jeff got here, it was like, oh boy, they're gonna get it now. When you saw him walk in and he saw the spray paint, it was like, uh-oh, somebody's gonna get their butt kicked. And it felt like that, and it definitely happened.
We're at Edison, and that was the only game we lost during the year.
The game was a battle all game, but the 2-point difference was on the extra point, they came out and did the swinging gate, and we didn't know how to align to it. And I believe that they ended up snapping the ball sideways to the guy that was standing behind the biggest part of the line, and he walked into the end zone for a 2-point conversion.
And then we took the lead late in the 4th quarter, and it was 17 seconds to go, and Edison had the ball, and they were running a sweep or something to the right. As soon as I went to make the tackle, I got clipped, and the guy blew my knee out. I got hurt. That happened on Saturday, and I got operated on Monday, so I was out for the year. So with 17 seconds to go in the game, they ran a pass play, and they set up their field goal, and they kicked a field goal with 3 seconds to go to beat us. And that was our only loss.
We also played North Plainfield at North Plainfield, and that was a very close game. I think the game was 14-12 or 14-13. And the thing that I remember in that game was defensively, I played monster back. North Plainfield had a tight end that was about 6'5", and I was 5'7" or 5'8". And every time that kid ran out on a pass pattern, I just got in close and I grabbed him and I held him and I harassed him, and I just would not let him go anywhere. And I really didn't get any calls against us. North Plainfield has the ball. They're, I guess, inside their own 20. I grabbed Jimmy DePaul, who was the defensive end, and I said, "Jimmy, take the tight end on this play and cover him. If he goes out for a pass, you go with him. And Jimmy had no pass coverage in the defense that we played. And I told him, I said, Jimmy, I'm blitzing. I said, and nobody knows. I said, you hold on to that tight end. Do not let him go, and I'm going. Lo and behold, I blitz, and I think Richie Collins hits the back in the backfield. The ball drops on the ground, and as I run past, the ball bounces up into my stomach. And I grab the ball, and nobody knows, and I'm going the other way for a touchdown, and nobody even knew what was happening. And we needed the touchdown because, like I said, I think we only beat them by 1 or 2 points. So that's another great memory that I had of the season.
Piscataway faced Bridgewater East, which at that time was the powerhouse in the Mid-State Conference. There were 8 teams in the conference, and for quite a few years, Bridge East had been at the top of the heap. They were where everybody else was trying to get to. They'd been undefeated 3 years in a row. They steamrolled teams. They'd been awarded championships by the state. And on this particular year, they came in here to this field. They were undefeated. They were 5-0, and we were 4-1. So it was a showdown for the conference, which, again, we'd only won once, and they'd won several times.
Danny Wilbur was their quarterback, and I played baseball against him. He was a catcher from Bridgewater East. And I played American Legion ball against him, Babe Ruth ball against him, and high school baseball against him, plus football. And he was a thrower. They had Vanderbeek at running back. They were very strong.
You know, I had the unique situation where I was a track guy, and George Griner, our coach, coached track, and Coach Higgins coached track with Piscataway. So when we certainly went to our dual meets or our county meets, Coach Higgins always have something to say to me in a friendly but competitive-like way. First couple plays of the game, they ran inside with Richie Collins, and he literally, and I know he was a very good hurdler. The next series, our quarterback, Danny Wilbur, we were running an option, and he was supposed to pitch the ball to me, but he got tackled and in the midst of pitching, and the ball just, went fumbled. Piscataway got the ball to the 20-yard line, and they scored.
In this game, Piscataway took an 18-0 lead. We scored on several big plays, one of which was the longest pass play in Piscataway history.
The safety would always cover Eddie Mullins. Prior to that play, he went limping off the field. And I called a flare pass to Mullins. And just as we were breaking out of the line, that kid came in and switched places. He came back on the field. We're in a lot of trouble, because this kid's going to read this. Look where the heck I called this play. Barrett threw the ball. Nice pass to Eddie Mullins. And the safety had a dead beat on him. And just as the safety reached for the ball, Eddie Mullins, who sort of was just maybe a step past the ball, reached his arm back and tapped it. And he just used every bit of speed that he had to outrun everybody.
We were up 18-0. Bridgewater had, a couple weeks before, come from behind to beat Franklin. They were way down, they came all the way back, and they were primed to do it again. They cut the lead to 18-14 by the end of the third quarter and had some momentum going when Piscataway stopped it, and a couple more big plays, and we put them away 32-14.
Bridgewater East had a really good team, as you said, and I remember newspaperman Paul Franklin. In the papers, you know, they would predict the outcome of the game, and he predicted us to win that game. He's the only one who gave us a chance, or if he didn't predict us to win, he even had the score close. And I remember during the closing of that game on the sideline, Paul was standing there, and I nudged Coach Higgins, and I said, Paul's the only one that gave us a shot. And they made eye contact, and I could see Higgins wink at him toward the end of the game. And that was really quite a moment to experience.
The backfield set was just absolutely incredible, and it was also filtered in with some really, really tough linemen. One of the ones I specifically remember is Pete Bellina. He was one of those old-fashioned, down in the dirt, you know. He would be filthy from the minute practice was started. He was covered with dirt. You know, he's one of those down in the dirt guy, but loved football. Tom was very fond of him, being a former lineman himself, naturally. When our season ended, you know, everybody was a little sad because we had a great year. We never thought we were going to the playoffs because, as I said previously, we didn't know what the criteria was. So, as a gesture to Pete, he says, Pete, here's your helmet. And his eyes lit up like a kid getting the greatest Christmas present ever. He says, do what you want with it. Make it a lamp. You know, whatever you want. You deserve this thing. And this thing was beat up because, as I said, he was one of those old-fashioned type of linemen. So he gives Pete the helmet. A few days later, Tom gets a call that we are going to be in the playoffs. We're going to be playing Colonia down in Atlantic City. So he calls Pete. He says, Pete, he says, I hope you didn't make a lamp out of your football helmet yet. He says, no, Coach. Why? Because he relayed the story to me. He says, because we got another game to play.
And so that dynamic of us playing Colonia in the final was incredible because we knew the kids on the team. My brother, played in Colonia, and Dad knew the coaching staff. They knew the players. My sister was a cheerleader. So for us to play them in the final game was very, very personal. I think he probably wanted this one more than anything because of that and because he knew the guys. And he did respect them. However, this was his team. So I think it was a big deal for us to beat the town that we were living in.
We went up against Colonia, who had the Alvarez Brothers. These were two 6'2", 6'4", 220, 230-pound guys, both tackles, and they were what we had to worry about. They knew how to get guys off their feet. They were very good. They were considered all-state tackles.
Higgins' family lived 3 blocks away from me, so I would pass Mr. Higgins all the time. He was not a friendly guy as far as waving to the opposite team. He was just a complete competitive person.
So here we are again in Boardwalk Hall, bringing back some memories, and one memory that came back to me was the smell of the place when we walked in, because they had just freshly sodded the field and it smelled like we were walking into a cow pasture. It was a big thrill because we all got introduced individually, and we got to run out through the goalpost.
At the chief position, number 21, 5'8", 165-pound senior, Steve Bianchi.
I remember the game started with Jeff Hensel kicking off and gave himself a concussion.
One of the upmen about the 48-yard line for Colonia.
The problem was that Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City was a concrete floor, and all they did was roll sod out on top of the concrete floor. Jeff falls down on the concrete and he can't remember a thing. So he can't play offense anymore because he can't remember the plays, but concussions and things like that were looked at much differently back then. So Jeff was still allowed to play defense because all he had to do was go tackle somebody.
All I remember the most, it smelled like a cow pasture in there because they brought in all sod and put it down on top of the concrete. And that's what we played on. And we played the last game on a Sunday night after all the other state games were done. So after every other play, they have these little kids running on the field, pushing the field back together because it was all falling apart and it smelled horrible in there.
4th down and 2 for the Patriots of Colonia High School. The Petit going to get caught in the backfield. Fine tackle over there by Ron Rhodes.
And that game was just a war. It was a war attrition. Whoever was going to have the ball last was going to win, but nobody could move the ball. It was a defensive struggle.
They're coming back and handing off. It looks like Alvarez.
Although Hensel tried, the 6-foot senior just wasn't himself. His replacement on both sides of the ball was number 66, junior Bob Scardina.
So now I'm dealing with a backup linebacker who wasn't really prepared to play, figuring that Jeff was going to play, and didn't know his plays, didn't know what to do. So I kind of coaxed him through as much as I could, and he did a terrific job.
Big pitch goes to Bradley, and Bradley gets hit at the 29, right at the line of scrimmage. Bob Scardina in now is one of the linebacking positions over there to help the stop, and it's 3rd down and 7 from the 29. Higgins this time pitching right, Petit on the option, throws downfield, and it's picked off by Rose. Ron Rose intercepting the pass and finally thrown out of bounds at the 32-yard line.
What helped me was the arrogance of the actual crowd. So while I was doing my techniques, my swim techniques around the center and all that, I believe there was either a friend of Mahoney, who was the center at the time, who I was going to face. Someone yelled out from the crowd saying, "Hey, my boy Mahoney is going to kick your butt." And it just drove me crazy.
There's the option flag on the play once again. Ray Jackson going absolutely nowhere. Good penetration by Cesar Alvarez, among others.
My forte, very, very quick off the ball.
Sarah's great drop back here, the blitz, and once again, Cesar Alvarez, number 77. Alvarez is blowing right by Jerry Mahoney.
And I was the holder. So we now get in a position where the coaches tell me if we don't get this first down, we're gonna attempt a field goal. So I grab Jeff, and I say, "Come on, we gotta take a couple snaps." So I go take 2 or 3 snaps with him, and I look at him, and I say, "Jeff, you okay?" He says, "Yeah, man, I'm good." And with that, they yell field goal. So now with that, I'm running out onto the field with Jeff next to me. And we're talking on the way out, and I'm saying, "Hey, Jeff," I said, "Are you okay?" What? And he's telling me, "Steve, I can't, I'm seeing like double or triple." So I said, "Look, I'm gonna put my right hand on the ground, and I'm gonna leave it there for as long as I can. Just try to kick my hand." We get out there, the ball gets snapped, I put the ball down, Jeff kicks the ball, and it comes off like a top.
A 37-yard attempt. It's going to be short and wide to the left.
Jeff was definitely concussed.
That is the end of the first half of Convention Hall, and there you see, nobody's been able to put any points on the board. High spiral. McMahon was the man who kicked it, takes a good bounce, and Fields, dangerous play there by Mullins.
The one play that really comes to mind to me is the goal line stance, because if you look at the film, we had that whole left side was in the backfield. We almost knocked them out of the end zone. And 4th down and 1 yard to go. And I remember looking at my brother and saying, this is the play. We got to push these guys back. Our coach called for a quarterback sneak.
Hey, here we go. 4th and less than 1, about a foot. Lots of activity, and he quarterback didn't make it. Piscataway has held. Barra, the quarterback.
Piscataway's celebration was short-lived. After nearly receiving a safety, the Chiefs were forced to punt.
Number 30, 1st and 10 from the 29 of Piscataway. Higgins on the counter call. Big hole up the middle. There's Bradley. Bradley loose. Bradley, he made it. He's over. He dragged Ron Rose, number 44, to 5 yards. He drove in the new 5 yards.
But the Chiefs came right back with a perfectly executed option pitch from Barra to Mullins.
Buzzer had blown before. Mullins is going to outrace Dan McMahon to the end zone. The Piscataway fan, sorry about that. It's a touchdown. Going for 2. Let's watch now. Barra calling signals. Goes to Dockery. Dockery in 2 points and takes the lead. As we conclude play in the third quarter, 8-7.
Late in the game, Pete Bellina's penetration slowed down the Colonia Patriots, and Steve DePaul and Rich Collins teamed up to give the Chiefs the ball back.
2 minutes, 40 seconds remaining in this game. Rolling left, 8-8. And Harry Batiste drags him down. 1 minute to play in this football game. Their option, boy, they take a chance. It goes to Mullins, the 50-second first down, and he's loose. They go all the way. It's a foot race, the Mullins wins. Mullins going 53 yards. Touchdown by Mullins. Straight drop back, lots of pressure. Ignate throws the ball. Intercepted, and that should do it. Intercepted. The man who intercepted the ball, Bob Scordina. 5-4-3, and you'll see the fans from Piscataway coming out on the field, and Piscataway High School. Central Jersey Group 4 champions. The most exciting game, the final score, Piscataway 14 and Colonia 7, Larry Prymar.
There are times in your coaching career that you will end up having kids, a group of kids, that will play as a team together and achieve something really, really good. Every so often, that group, you'll get kids that will come in as sophomores that are a little bit more knowledgeable of the game. They soak everything up, and they play through it, and they become a peak.
I attribute the success of our team to being together since Pop Warner with a typical core of running backs, linebackers. The new guys added in the 9th grade were the big boys that Pop Warner wouldn't allow because of weight. Playing with these guys and winning, all right? I mean, that makes you love your brother even more, you know? And we were winners. We did not lose much. We lost a few, but not much.
The success was, in my opinion, was one, we really knew each other, we cared for each other. I mean, I hung around with Richie and other guys, always, more than I did down in my neighborhood. I used to ride around the back of the Richie motorcycle.
And I love it. I love going to the stakes. It's emotional. It's great seeing everybody again, and it brings back all kinds of memories. I just love it. I love going to school here.
Football, to me, is the ultimate team sport. You know, you can't compare it to war, but you are going to battle with these guys every weekend.
It was just a good core team, and we would not let anything get in the way. Like, there were distractions of riots over drugs and stuff like that. And I remember myself and Ray Jackson walking back to back through the corridor, not throwing any punches, but just trying to get to the locker room so we could get out on the football field. We didn't really give a damn about who got what drug and, you know, there's riots between blacks and whites. That was not in our game plan.
But we did we made a lot of friends, and we had a lot of camaraderie, because we all went in it together. We didn't have each other, we didn't have anybody.
I really do love the Ray Jackson, Eddie Mullins, Fred Charnico, and all the guys that I played with, you know, Gordon First, when I used to hang out up here.
This team 72, this team 74 were the patriarchs for Piscataway football championships. I could tell you that it's ingrained in stone with me, the way I coach, how I coach, what it means to be a chief. all the characteristics of what Piscataway football is about comes from 72-74, and I will stand on that the day I die. We've had a lot of success. We've had a lot of guys going all the way up to the NFL, but the guys who started it all, they set the tone, 72-74, Scott.